Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Been a while, and it's good to see you. You're absolutely everywhere, and we love how engaged you've been personally, in the community over the last several months, conferences, podcasts. So really appreciate your time.
Oh yeah, well, I appreciate talking with you. Thanks.
Of course. So let's get into it. So Leemon, this is really the first what we're calling HBAR Foundry TownHall, but really we want to kind of go back to some of the things that I think a lot of us in the community loved, with the Hedera, with what you guys did with the town halls back in the day, and really just revisit that. It's more or less in the same format, and of course all of us love hearing from you, and you have so many insights. That being said, I'm going to introduce my colleague here, Jeremy Fletcher. Jeremy was one of the first folks to get the HBAR Foundry going. And Jeremy, would you like to do a quick just recap and intro for the HBAR Foundry?
Yeah, sure. So of course, I'm Jeremy Fletcher, CEO and co-founder of Ledgerama, the makers of Walla Wallet. And we're super excited to be here today. So the HBAR Foundry was something that we started back in August of 2020, Leemon. And essentially, my partner, Rob Keynes, and I were running into some issues with key derivation, building the wallet. And we had reached out to some other folks, folks at Launchbadge and folks, Greg Scullard over there at Swirls. And we were asking, what is the standard for key derivation? And essentially this response that we got was, well, it's been left open for the community developers to decide. And we said, okay, well, that's us. So we wanted to get together. A few of us, part of the early Hedera Ambassador program, started to get together every week. We decided that Friday, we get together on Fridays at 11 a.m. And we just have a lot of fun. It's a great way for builders, entrepreneurs, and developers in the Hedera ecosystem to get together and talk shop and blow off steam and do all those fun things that we enjoy doing together. It's become quite a tradition. We've been, like I said, since 2020. So it's been over 3 years. We've been getting together, 160 plus meetings. And as we've worked to formalize HBAR Foundry, really in just this year, we've started to work on formalizing it a little bit more. And we're working on things like building tooling to make it a little bit more inviting for developers that are coming into the ecosystem. Because we're entrepreneurs and business leaders from a wide array of different industries with a lot of deep technical knowledge and ability, we're really in a good position to kind of look out over the horizon and anticipate some of those problems that might be coming down the line with the ecosystem, and really start to lay the groundwork and lay the foundation for developers and other folks that want to come into the ecosystem. So there's and we're really focused on being a unified voice of the Hedera community, something that, a way that we can kind of channel this energy of the different businesses and entrepreneurs building in the ecosystem. So it's been a lot of fun, and we're super excited to be here and have you on, Leemon. Thank you so much for your time and for being here. And so the way that these questions will flow, we're going to do a little bit of past, present, and future. We thought it'd be fun to get in a little bit of the past. So Leemon, you spent a long time, my understanding is 24 years at the Air Force Academy. And so I'd like to know, how did you get there in the first place to the Air Force Academy? What brought you into the Air Force? And then how did that experience at the Air Force Academy shape your mindset and future endeavors?
Yeah, so I was in the Air Force for 24 years. It wasn't all at the Academy. I went to lots of different places, but yep, the Academy was fun. I loved being a professor there. So you were asking, what happened? I started, that's where I went for college. So, 18-year-olds old, you get out of high school, and I went to the Academy. It was very intense. And I think that was a good thing. I think I probably learned working under pressure, doing lots of things when you don't have any time, some of those things. They have a strong emphasis on leadership. I think that was probably useful. So I think it was a good experience going to the Academy. I spent free time reading computer science journals and trying to teach myself, and took lots of extra electives in computer science and EE. But I think if I had gone to a more academic school, maybe I would have learned more as an undergrad, but I'd probably learn more life lessons going to a more intense, less academic area. And so that was really fun. And I got to go off in the Air Force, and I was a research scientist in labs and doing other things. And I got to go to school, and I got to come back and teach a couple times at the Academy. And the final time I was there for a number of years and got to be a professor. I love teaching. That was just wonderful. Getting to work with the cadets who are the next generation. That was really cool.
You're such a great teacher, Leemon. One of my favorite one of my favorite YouTube videos of all time is that Harvard talk you gave a few years back. You're just, you're really shining in that arena there. And I am interested, how did you met Mance as your part of your experience in the Air Force? Is that correct?
That is true. So my first base that I went to, I was doing research on artificial intelligence and machine learning, really cool stuff. And I was just a second lieutenant there. And then I became a first lieutenant, I think, while I was there. Yeah. And 6 months before I left, this brand new second lieutenant, first assignment in the Air Force came in and was working for me. And that was Mance. And we only overlapped for 6 months. But then after we left, we continued to do research together and publish all sorts of papers about artificial intelligence and machine learning, reinforcement learning, neural networks, all that stuff. For years, we were doing that. And without even living in the same place, we eventually ended up both teaching at the Air Force Academy, but at different times. We didn't even overlap there. And so it was actually quite a while before we even lived in the same state. But we did all these research papers together. And then in 2000, we starting companies. And we started a whole chain of companies together. And now we live in the same state, same town. But for a long time, we were working just remotely.
Right, that async. Very, very interesting. Thanks, Leemon.
Yeah, that is really interesting, Leemon. So let's fast forward a little bit to the more recent past. And certainly, as you mentioned, you've been working with Mance for a long time and started, amongst other things, started Swirls and then Hedera. So one of the innovations that we love, a lot of us in the community have been using, and certainly at the ACORP we love, is Hedera Consensus Service. We use it for all kinds of things. I did hear your recent, and of course, before, I would say 4 or 5 years ago, there was a lot of kind of noise about private blockchains, and with HCS, you introduced this idea that you could bridge the public network Hedera to AppNets, a private blockchain. So as I was reflecting about this, I heard you speak recently about some of the use cases for private blockchains, including CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. Of course, as you know, Leemon, that's CBDCs have been in news a lot recently, certainly in the US. There's, I think, just tomorrow, I believe the House Finance Services Committee is getting together to have a bill to prevent CBDCs. And one of the things, they cite a number of things, but one of the things they cite is this idea that CBDCs pose privacy and government surveillance issues. So my question to you is, how does HCS help here?
Okay, that's a very big question. So HCS has uses when you want to store information immutably forever, have the whole world see it. So it's like a notary public. That's one of the uses of HCS. But the other use of the Hedera Consensus Service is to provide consensus to a separate network. And so one of the uses of HCS is actually in the name of it. And that's what you're talking about. So today, you can build a Hyperledger fabric network. It's a private network. You pick what computers run it, you run the code, and then somehow it has to put all your transactions in order. That's where the security comes from. And then every node processes the transactions. But putting them in order and giving them timestamps is the hard part, the consensus part of it. And if you take a traditional consensus algorithm, you could do that at the bottom layer. But then you have to trust that a super majority of your nodes, maybe more than 2/3 of the nodes in your little private network, are all honest. And if 1/3 of them gang up and do something evil, they can just destroy the whole thing. So what you can do instead is you use our plugin. So there's a plugin into Hyperledger Fabric that says at the very bottom layer, all the transactions get sent off to Hedera. Hedera puts them in order with the HCS service, the Hedera Consensus Service, and then sends them back. And now you know the order, and you have this proof. Any node on the network can prove that, it can check the proof that it really was what Hedera thought was the right order. So you really do know this is the correct order. And then they can all process them. And then you only need basically one honest computer to get the right result. And if you're running one of the computers, you know yours is honest, and you have a much better trust in the network. You have much better security. It brings the full trust of Hedera into your network. And so if you really trust something, people call it trustless. And yes, it would be like that. So the idea of HCS is that you can run a private network. You can encrypt all your transactions. So what's going through Hedera is just encrypted transactions. No one has any idea what they are. And they're all coming from the same computer, so you don't even know who made each transaction. You really have privacy. And yet your private network has the security and the trust of a big public network. That's a way of combining the two. So I think there are a lot of use cases for that, and we can talk about use cases for that. And it isn't just that. EEA also has a plugin to use HCS. R3 Corda has a plugin to use HCS. We have plugins to all these major private networks where you can get the consensus being done by Hedera, but you have everything private. Everything's encrypted. Nobody outside your little network can see what you're doing. You control who's able to access your network. There are lots of use cases for that. I suspect that CBDC is not a use case for that. I think CBDC would be great on a Hashgraph network. It's open source code. Take the code of Hedera and run that. But I suspect that most governments would not want to rely for any part of their CBDC on a public network or a private network that they don't control. That'd be my guess. So my guess is the right way to do a CBDC is that you would have, well, in America, it'd be the Federal Reserve banks. They would all run a node in the network. Okay, so this is a private network, and they probably trust each other. They trust this network. In a lot of ways, it's what we already have today. We can talk about that. People have argued, well, we already have a CBDC. Why are you making laws about CBDCs? We already have one. And I can tell you how that's right and how that's not right. But what I would envision is they would all run those nodes. They might run Hedera nodes or copies of the Hedera source code. I think that would actually be ideal. You have the speed, you have the security, it's very good. But whatever they would do, they would run their own. And then they would have their own DLT, their own blockchain. That is the official CBDC network. But then it would also bridge to other networks. And this is why it'd be better than what we have today. So what do we have today? Most of the dollars in the United States are ones and zeros. They're stored in computers on a network where all the Federal Reserve banks get together and agree on it. Well, that's a blockchain, right? Not really. So it does not, first of all, it doesn't have the security that you would want. I think if you compromised any one bank, you would compromise the whole network. It'd be nice to have security. So a DLT would be nice for that. More importantly, though, it's not designed to interoperate with other ledgers. A very important part of ledgers that we're at the beginning of right now is that you build bridges between them. You have a token on one ledger, and then you can freeze it and create a wrapped token on a second ledger. You can move tokens between ledgers. And there's a whole bunch of stuff around this. What you really want is for the US dollar then to be on the CBDC network, but then the wrapped US dollar could be used on other networks. And that's the ultimate stablecoin. And so this is the kind of thing that you really would want to do for a CBDC, I think. We can talk more about that, but HCS plays a role in a lot of private networks. Maybe not that one, but the Hedera source code might really play a role in that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So as an example, you could take like a Hedera Hashgraph container and deploy it in whatever network you want, whatever infrastructure you want.
Yeah.
So we will talk a little bit more about tokenization, coming up, and just particularly this idea of interoperability. However, not to digress into that, I do want to ask you a question though. There's a conflation about using layer ones and token economics, and people think they're synonymous. Do you need to even do tokenization if you're using HCS as example? Do you need to do token economics?
Sorry, what is your question? You need tokens, you need token economics, you need networks.
Right.
I'm sorry.
If you're using HCS, do you need to necessarily have a token that's publicly available? That's really the question.
If you have a network, somehow people have to be able to send transactions to it. And if you say all transactions are free forever, well, then people will flood you with transactions and shut you down. So you have to have a way that people can pay for the transactions. And they can't really pay for it with US dollars. You can't push a dollar bill into the network. So you need a native token of the network. Now, someday, if you had something like a CBDC, you could imagine using the wrapped version of that CBDC as the native token. But then again, the native token is not the CBDC token, it's a wrapped version of the CBDC token. And probably the most efficient way to do that is just have a native token. So probably L1s will always have a native token. It just kind of makes sense. But you can imagine one whose native token is a wrapped US dollar if the CBDC ever happened. You could imagine something like that.
Yeah, interesting. That's a deep, certainly a deep topic that we could get into on a whole other session. But let's move on for now.
Thanks for that. And I would like to welcome Zenobia. Zenobia popped in. So of course, Zenobia, you're welcome to go on camera and join the conversation. Always a pleasure to have you.
Hello, I am just here as a fly on the wall, and
Okay.
you guys are running this fantastically. So thank you.
Well, welcome, and thanks for joining us. So we're going to move into the present. So Leemon, every job has got its ups and downs. Pretty much, I don't think I've ever had a job that didn't have at least one thing that I just would really rather not have to do with that. But sometimes you're the only one that can do it, right? It's that you're the one for the job. But the question is, what are some of your biggest joys in your work? And then what are some of the things that you might rather have somebody else do, but you're the only one that can do it and you've got to do it?
The joys are seeing things being built. We have, from the beginning, have been building a 100-year project. And so we see the network being built, and we see the council being built, and we see the ecosystem being built, and we see the community being built, and the HBAR. It is so exciting to see things being built. There's a building being built in my apartment, and I just enjoy watching it be built. It's just something satisfying about going from nothing to something of real value. There's just something satisfying about that. And it'll feel good when that building finishes being built. So what I get to do is build things in my job. That is a real joy. And then I get to solve puzzles. Because when you want to build something, you want to build it right. From the very beginning, this has been something we say over and over again, is we want to do it the right way. Let's not just build something we need for right now, but let's make sure it's designed so it'll work in the future too, and that it can grow, and that it can evolve, and that it can do all the things that it needs to do. Let's do everything the right way. Let's do governance the right way and have a council, and everyone has exactly equal votes, and we have transparency, and they're big enough to balance each other, and we have top 10 universities in the world and Fortune 100 companies and balancing each other. Let's do governance right. Let's do consensus right. The Hashgraph algorithm is ABFT. Everything we do, we try to do it right. So one of my joy is to be building things. My joy is to be doing puzzles, which is what I get to do for fun. I've done that since a kid. Doing puzzles is fun. And everything we're building, you have to figure out the right way to do it. That's a puzzle. I really enjoy that. And then it's fun to talk to people and teach them about it. I enjoy teaching. We just talked about that. And so these are all things that I do in my job that are fun. By far, the most non-fun thing in my job is I want everything done now. I want to build everything I have in my head for the next 100 years today. And we are making progress as fast as we can. We are all running as fast as we can. And I just wish we could go faster than the speed of light and just be there. By far, the most frustrating thing is just that we can't do it all in one day. And so we are doing everything as fast as we can. We're doing it in the appropriate order. And there again is another way you want to do it right. Do things in the right order. Make sure you sequence things correctly. So if there's anything that's frustrating, it's just that I wish we could do more. I wish I didn't have to sleep at night. I wish I could work 24/7, just get more done. But yeah, it's good.
We certainly feel that pain as well. Always, wishing things that could move a little bit faster. I think, Leemon, I think you and my business partner, our CTO, Rob Keynes, would get along very well. He is one of the most talented builders that I've ever met, and he is adamant about doing things the right way. So I think you two would probably get along quite well.
I like that.
And no doubt, Leemon. In fact, there are a lot of people in the community, and I think they're driven by getting things done, by action, and just I think the HBAR Foundry is a reflection of that, because there are a lot of people here that instead of waiting for things to happen, we want to, just like in this conversation, connect with people like yourself, learn, but also really hold ourselves accountable. That being said, going back to kind of your passion in building, which certainly we echo. At the beginning of this year, you mentioned a number of objectives that you had, and we certainly have heard you say you want to continue, or you are continuing to make the network faster, better, more secure. You did mention some specific objectives at the beginning of the year. Was in the governing council, one of the briefings, such as community nodes, HDS enhancements, scalability, composability. So the question is, where are we right now? Like, what is on your critical path to success on some of these objectives?
Yeah, so there's been lots of features added that do the things that you're saying, the themes that you're saying. I think we had 6 main themes that everything falls within, if I recall correctly. And those update over time. I think we just recently added identity as a big theme, but we have the things you're talking about. So scalability, we're always adding things. Actually, our latency got a second faster recently, which is kind of cool. We will continue to do scalability. There's other forms of scalability that we're doing. We are working on composability and equivalence to the Ethereum ecosystem, making tools easier to work on us. So, the smart contracts have been compatible since day one. You can take a smart contract from Ethereum and run it on us. It's Solidity, it works. But equivalence is bigger than that. It's making sure all the tools work. And yes, you can run an ERC20 on us, but then you have all the slowdown of that. What you really want to use is native tokens. Great. But then sometimes you have something complicated you want to do. So you want to have a smart contract for the complicated stuff that then reaches out to the native tokens. So ordinary transfers are really fast because they're just native tokens and cheap. And then smart contracts are used when you need them. So they have to interoperate, which means we had to do things to make it so that when a smart contract looks out and sees native stuff, it looks like it's just another smart contract. It looks like it's things that your tools already know how to deal with. So we've been putting a lot of effort into that. We've been putting effort into, of course, building the council. And then there's all sorts of new features. So state proofs are important. So right now, we have the main net nodes, and then we have the mirror network, all the mirror nodes, and the mirror nodes find out everything that's happened from the main net. And when the main net is sending these files to the mirror nodes, it includes cryptographic proofs that what it's getting truly was the consensus of the main net. Right? Today, those are done with lists of signatures, and they'll be done with zero knowledge proofs in the future. This is, and they'll probably say list of signatures too. We can talk about post-quantum issues too, and we'll probably have both. But the state proof is how the mirror node knows that all this summary of what we decided is what we decided. It really was the consensus of the network. That was version 1. Then we have a version 2 of state proofs that are internal to the network right now. Just internally, the nodes are making proofs on each round that the state of that round is correct. And they swap signatures with each other, and they collect all these signatures, and this too will become zero knowledge proofs at some point. And so we have those state proofs, but we want to have further state proofs. Oh, and we also have the mirror nodes now provide state proofs to users. So if you want to know that this transaction really had this effect, you can get a state proof. And the state proof is, well, here's the file that had that transaction in it, and we can delete all the other things in the file, just leave a hash for each thing, and then give you the hash of the file and give you a state proof on that hash. So we have that, but we want to take it further. We want to take it further so that if you just ask, what's my balance right now? It'll give you a state proof that as of this timestamp, this is your balance. And it'll be a small state proof, very tiny. And so that's something coming, and we have our cryptographers working on it, and it's making progress on that. So that's interesting. And then when we get that, on that, then you could start building other things. Okay, you just asked about this year. There's things further in the future, interledger communication and sharding. And those are based on state proofs. So once you have state proofs, you can do interledger communication and still have it be ABFT as a whole, assuming the individual ledgers are ABFT. And then you can build a sharded system where the whole sharded system is ABFT because each of the pieces are ABFT and the interledger communication between them, inter-shard communication between them is ABFT. So all of that stuff we're working on. What else? We keep adding HIPs. So the Hedera improvement process, the community keeps suggesting new features, and then the community discusses it. It goes pros and cons and changes it until it's final. And then the council, the TechCom committee ends up approving it, and then it gets implemented. And we've been implementing lots of those. So lots of HIPs are getting implemented. And some of them are part of the themes that you mentioned, and some of them are just little features that people wanted, and those are all getting implemented. I think you said some other things. I don't remember what all you said, but we've just got a lot going on. There's a lot of things that we're adding and improving, and our vision for the future. Again, I've got 100 years worth of ideas that I want in the future. I wish we could do them all today, but we are working as fast as we can.
Yeah, Lehman, kudos to you because, and I think there's a lot of proof on what you say, but looking at the HIPs, I think 9 of those were written by you. So just the fact that you're so directly involved and hands-on still, and obviously impatient to get things done. That's great. When we see that as a community, that you're that engaged yourself, I think that just reinforces our, kind of belief and also our commitment to what we're doing. Because it's always good to see that, that your words are reflected by actions. That being said, we're gonna move on to the next question now.
So Leemon, Swirls has evolved quite a bit over the years. It evolved first into Hedera. Then there were some grant organizations that were spawned, the HBAR Foundation, now the Hashgraph Association, important entities in the ecosystem. a holding company for the Hedera Council and Swirls Labs. So where we're at now, what is the vision for Swirls Labs? There's some things being worked on. My understanding there's some things being worked on that are not necessarily Hedera specific. So what's the big vision for Swirls Labs?
Yeah. So we had the 6 organizations you said. Swirls was the start of it all, but it doesn't do anything now, except it is a council member. Then you have the council. The council is 29 independent, have equal votes. They discuss and then they vote. It's on-chain voting. I mean, they actually, the things that they change by jointly signing a multi-sig transaction that occurs on-chain. But the council also gets together and talks to each other. And for that, we have Hedera LLC that coordinates that. And so it coordinates how they all get together. So it arranges meetings. We recently had a meeting in London. That was fun. We all got together. You know, Zoom just doesn't cut it. During COVID, we had all our Zoom meetings. That's great. It is better than nothing. But there is just something when you're in person. You accomplish more in a coffee break than you do by 10 hours of Zoom. So we have Hedera doing that. We have the 3 grant-giving organizations, the HBAR Foundation, Hashgraph Association, and the DLT Science Foundation. They give grants. They have slightly different focuses. It's fun. And then we have Swirls Labs. So Swirls Labs right now has a large number of employees. It's the biggest of all 6 organizations. It has 130, I think, something. I don't know. The exact number keeps changing. We keep hiring people. Yeah, I just saw a hello to yet another person. But we are doing lots of things. We are building software. Building the Hedera mainnet software. And we also work on mirror node software and on tools. And there's sites like HashScan, which is really cool. And we work on that. And we work on SDKs and other things. So there's a lot of things that we're involved in. It's all open source and other people are involved too, but we're involved in a lot of those things. We also do some of the marketing for some of the other organizations in the group. And so there's a lot of work that we are doing right now, sort of directly for the Hedera Council, the Hedera mainnet, and the associated stuff, and the grant-giving organizations. But we are also looking to help the Hedera ecosystem in other ways. And so we're going to look for other things we can do, like other lines of business we can do, and to grow into a company that is doing lots of things in the Hedera ecosystem. And so I don't know what we'll end up doing right now. We're still looking at various things. We're kind of busy with our day job right now, working on the network and working on the things that really have to get done. Those are always the top priority. But we also want to aid the community. And we're looking at where in the whole ecosystem, what are some holes that need to be filled? What are some things that need to be done? And maybe we can have our business expand out into those. And so we're working on that. We just hired a BD guy and we are looking at all of that. I don't know yet what we'll do, but we'll let the world know when we find out.
Well, we look forward to continuing to help at the HBAR Foundry as well. Our resources are at your disposal. So where do you see the most growth potential for Swirls Labs?
Well, okay, so there's the growth in all those businesses that I don't know yet what they are. That's all I can say. Sure. Swirls Labs is just looking at lots of different areas right now for things that we can do. You can do products, you can do services, you can do consulting, you can do licensing of things. There's lots of different kinds of things you can do. And so we're trying to figure that out. Do you have a shrink wrap product you sell? Do you have libraries that you license? Do you have a website that offers a service that you sell? There's lots. Do you have people that just go out and help people for money? That one doesn't scale as well. But all of these things, some mixture of all these things, can we invest in small startups and work with them? All these things we're just thinking, we don't know yet what we're doing.
Excellent. A true startup. Still that entrepreneurial startup spirit. I love it. Thanks for that. It is.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, Leemon, we do know that seems like over the last year, at least, maybe longer, that there has been a focus on this idea of a DREC, and which I believe is one of your original research, kind of material. What is DREC? Why do we need it?
Oh, yeah. So here is something Swirls Labs is doing. I was talking about things that it's doing for profit. DREC is purely for nonprofit. And it isn't just us. So we're working with other companies. We want to work with other blockchains, and we've been talking to others. We'll see if we can get other L1s or even L2s involved. DREC isn't even exclusive to DLTs and blockchain. DREC is the following. You have secrets in your life that you need to protect. And in most of the world prior to Web3, you always had a safety net. You lose the password to your bank account, you can still get in. Ultimately, you can go to the courts and you can force yourself in. If you lose the keys to your car, you can get a locksmith to get you in. If you lose the keys to your house, you can put a brick through the window. There is always a safety net. But if you have the keys to your account on a ledger with cryptocurrency or tokens in it, and you lose your keys, guess what happens? Really bad.
Really bad.
Really bad. Now, we're a bunch of enthusiasts in this industry. You know, the blockchain world is a bunch of enthusiasts, and we just put up with that. But we're never going to go mainstream unless the ordinary person can be involved in what we're doing and know they're never going to lose it. So you have some kid playing a video game where the in-game assets are tokenized. Hey, I worked 100 hours or 1,000 hours. I don't know how much, 10,000 hours. I don't know how much it takes to get some of these. And then, oh, my phone got erased and I lost the keys to it. And now I've lost this thing that I worked 1,000 hours to get. You need to have a backup system for secrets. And it isn't just these secrets. It's also passwords. So programs like 1Password, remember your passwords for you, or Apple and Android, just inherently in iOS and in Android, they store secrets for you. And there are plugins into your browsers that'll store secrets for you, passwords. Those need to be protected. Those are incredibly important. Your life would be seriously disrupted if you were to lose those. Those need to be protected. And hopefully someday we'll get away from passwords and go to passkeys, but then those have to be protected. There's always some kind of a secret. Ultimately, I hope that your entire life, all of your identity ends up being electronic. Your passport is electronic. It's in your phone. You can identify. You can do zero-knowledge proofs to tell people things. Identity is in your phone. But at the bottom of it all, there always has to be a secret that ultimately the way you prove you're you is that you know that secret and other people don't. How do we back it up? And the idea is very simple. You have a bunch of helpers. Maybe they're friends, maybe they're companies, and they each hold a share of it. And in math, you can do it where the share tells them nothing at all until a bunch of shares are put together. And if you lose your information, you go out, they all give you back your shares. First, they make sure you are you. Then they give you back your shares and you reconstruct your thing. Lots of people have talked about this. Then you don't have to do multi-sig. You can have an account with a single signature on it, a single key on it. But you use this to help save your key among many people. And nobody knows that you're using it. You have privacy. No one knows how many people are helping you. No one knows who is helping you. No one even knows that you're using such a system. The important thing, though, is that you have to be able to have your device asking those devices every night, hey, are you still alive? Do you still have my secret? Can you prove to me, share of my secret? Can you prove to me cryptographically that you still have a share of my secret? There has to be automatic background verification, because if you don't have that, I guarantee you, one by one, your helpers are going to get a new phone. They're going to lose their phone. They're going to forget the secret somehow, and you'll never know it until you need it, and then it's too late. You've got to have this background pinging of them to see if they still have it. And it needs to be interoperable so that every ledger, every password manager can be using a system where one person can be helper as a service, and then they can help people on all those different platforms. So that's the goal. We're making standards. It'll be an RFC. It'll be other standards. It's an API with libraries that will be written in multiple languages. There's multiple companies working together right now on this. And as I said, we're very interested in people from different blockchain communities, even people outside the Web3 world, like people who do password managers. We're very interested in getting everyone involved, and everyone can contact me if you're interested, and you can get involved in helping to build the standards and then to build maybe some libraries for it in different languages.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And obviously, like you say, Leemon, the scope here is far bigger than just, like wallets or digital currency and things like this. You did mention standards. And again, we could have probably at least another hour-long conversation about some of the things that Hedera has been doing and continues to do around interoperability. You mentioned, kind of wrap tokens and bridging and things like this earlier. But also, we have noticed that, as example, in I think just a couple months ago, there was a hire of Andrew Aitken as a chief open source officer. So I guess the question here is, where do you think Hedera is going in terms of its commitment to open source? What are some of the objectives that Andrew has as example? And how do you see this evolving into this interoperability across different chains and different networks?
Okay, several different questions here. So first of all, there is open source. Well, all our stuff is open source. It's been open source for a long time. Then there's the question, great, your software has a word at the top saying I'm open source. It's Apache 2. But is there actually a community building on it and using it? And so Andrew's goal is not to make us open source. We are open source. His goal is to build a community of people that are contributing to it and using it and building it into their products and then contributing back, and a thriving open source community. And so I love our HIP process. That has been fantastic. But of course, that's just the ideas. That's not actually the code. So what hopefully he'll be able to do is take this HIPS process that I have to say was a success. I would have to say the community is engaged and the engagement is even growing. And then grow it even more, but then put something under it so that we not just have people with ideas, we also have people writing the code for those ideas. And so his vision is that this becomes an enormous open source community built on our open source software. And then, of course, I said our software, but if it's open source, it's just kind of the community software in many ways. The council will vote on whether or not a given version ends up on mainnet. The council has to make sure that it's safe. But the community can just be growing these things, which is very cool. So I am excited about this open source stuff. So Andrew's the chief open source officer, and he will be working on that. He's been working a lot with us. He's talking a lot to Swirls Labs. He's talking a lot to the TechCom committee. He's talking to people outside of us. And stay tuned for all the things that he'll end up spearheading as we go forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we are hoping with the HBAR Foundry to have a conversation with Andrew and perhaps Atul and some other folks at Swirls and Hedera in general, just more technical and really delving into this topic, because it really deserves a lot of focus. That being said, I do know that again, you mentioned this a bit earlier. There is obviously a larger DLT and blockchain landscape, and we want to kind of segue into that just a little bit and just. We mentioned tokenization a little bit earlier a couple of times, and we know that, as an example, the standard still for fungible tokens is the ERC20. But that, I think many people would attest that there are a number of shortcomings with it. So just as we segue into interoperability with other chains, where do you see ERC20 as fit for purpose? What are some of the alternatives? How does Hedera fit into this?
Sure. So we're very much involved in that. We're involved in a lot of standards, standards for identity, standards for other things. We're very much involved in this, and we think standards are important. Standards for DREC, but ERC20. So ERC20 is technically rules for how that a smart contract needs to obey if it's going to be a token. But people have also put a lot of effort now into saying, well, there are better ways to do tokens. You can do native tokens. If it's a native token on a ledger, then it is able to go faster and cheaper and uses fewer bytes and everything is better. But ERC20 was designed as a way of interfacing with a smart contract. And so then the whole question is, can you make the native token look like it's hiding inside of a smart contract, even though it isn't? And so there are lots of ways of doing this. And we have put a lot of effort into some of this, and we will continue with this. I think the whole world will eventually evolve to where a simple transfer, if you are simply sending an NFT to someone or a fungible token, that's 721 for NFTs, but if you're sending a simple fungible token to somebody, you will not have to make a call to a smart contract. That's just wasteful if all you're doing is transferring a token. But you might very well use tools that are talking to other tools, and they're talking the language as if it were an ERC20, and they may just think that it's an ERC20. I think that we'll see some of that. But then we'll also just see other standards that say, well, why pretend to be a smart contract? We'll just have standards for how to talk that don't pretend. But in the shorter term, I think that we'll see a lot of things where people do this thing pretending. So having tools interoperable with ledgers is important. And I think our community has made good progress on that. The whole industry has made good progress on that. Then there's the question of how do you move things between ledgers? And that is not quite as good right now. We often have bridges that require their own validators, which means you have to trust them, which is like a whole nother blockchain you have to trust. And are there enough of them? Do I know who they are? And are they well governed? There's all sorts of interesting problems that can happen. Then you can also have ways of setting it up where you're based with smart contracts with hashes, and you can say, well, no one will ever be able to steal from me, but I still have to trust the bridge not to do denial of service attacks on me. So what you really would like is to have the ledgers talking to each other. They are directly sending messages from a validator on this ledger to a validator on this ledger directly. And you have a state proof where that single message coming from one single computer can prove to you, yeah, but really this is a message from a whole network. It isn't just from me. It really reflects everybody. And so you really want to have, you want to be able to have that, the interledger communication. There's a lot of work being done on various standards for interledger communication. I think those are going to grow over time. I think that there will be work on state proofs that will be growing over time. People are doing various things along these lines. And I think that we will be playing a lot with that when we have our state proofs, because our state proof will be a very small sequence of bytes that proves that this small sequence of bytes truly is the consensus of the Hedera network. And when I say Hedera network, it will have a network ID, which is a big long number. And if anyone ever tries to fork Hedera, they can run the same source code, but their network would have a different network ID, and it would be cryptographically impossible for them to send a message pretending that it was the real one when it's really the fake one or the clone or the small one or the other one. And I think that ultimately, as we grow and mature as an industry, we're going to end up taking over the world. Everything of value will be tokenized. I mean, that really is what's going to end up happening. And everything of value will be tokenized, and every area of business and society and education and everything is going to have at least some component that is using ledgers. Not everything will. There'll still be traditional blockchain databases, and there'll even be traditional, sometimes you store stuff on paper. That still happens. But just like most paper moved to databases, a lot of the database around value will move to blockchains and ledgers. And so I think we're going to see that. And our interoperability will be an important part of how we our industry ends up taking over the world and making the world better, making the world more trustworthy, safer, faster, disintermediating, and cheaper, because you've disintermediated, and even allowing us to do things we couldn't do before. And part of that will be the interledger communication, and it will be all the ledgers that you think of, and maybe some CBDC ledgers too, which would also be nice. All of that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Again, so deep. I love the idea, by the way. And again, this is a whole other conversation, a long conversation of using less smart contracts and maybe using, cryptographic state proofs across ledgers, and in many ways, maybe looking at really just offline open APIs and doing things that don't necessarily need to be on the chain and don't do them on the chain. But again, that's a big topic, and we are running out of time. So I appreciate that, Leemon. That was good. I think we're going to fast forward a little bit into our couple of questions about the future.
Cool. Hello, future.
Our eyes towards the future. So, Leemon, in your opinion, what are some of the most innovative and impactful non-cryptocurrency applications that you foresee coming down in the future?
Okay, so there's tokenization and information storage. Basically, those are the two things that ledgers do beyond cryptocurrency. Tokenization is a big deal. I've mentioned it several times. I've met someone who tokenized her house, and not only did that, where you could have people buy pieces of your house, but had this really cool system where you could do, it's through Toko, through DLA Piper's spinoff. You can do things like you just rent your house and you pay your rent, and your rent automatically splits up among all the people that hold the tokens. Fascinating. It's a whole new business model that helps more people get into houses, and it couldn't be possible until they had done this tokenization thing. We're going to see more of that. I'm seeing people tokenize other things of value across the world. You can even do things like tokenize widgets in your supply chain while you're building something. You can have early versions of it being tokenized, and then do automatic DeFi borrowing against that as an asset, and get micro loans based on that. This is a whole new thing that today would be so hard and so complicated to do and so hard to audit that it isn't worth doing. But we could do it, and it's more efficient. You can do just-in-time things, and you can get money just when you need it and only borrow it for as long as you need it, then pay it back. There's really cool things here. So that's DeFi. That's more than just people gambling on trading one token for another token. It's actually, one cryptocurrency for another one. It's actually dealing with making the world more efficient by bringing things into the ledgers. And so I think that we're going to see all sorts of that. And I talk about storing information. The consensus service is often used by people because it's only 1/100th of a cent, which is a 10,000th of a dollar, to store something in this immutably forever. And people are using this to store things with supply chain. We have Atma doing, 1,000 transactions a second right now on us. We have more than anybody, and that's their big application. And we have others in the pipeline. They're going to do something similar, it looks like. So you have storing information, and the important thing, if you just want to store information, use a database. The important thing is, if you want to store information in a way that even you can't go back and cook the books and change it retroactively, it needs to be immutable. And you want to guarantee to the world that they're all seeing the same thing. I talked to a nonprofit, they have the books, and they say, well, we could just email our books to all of our donors, but how do they know that they're seeing the same books that other people saw? Well, with a ledger, you know that everybody sees the same thing. And so people are doing this for tracking things in supply chain, which is very useful. You can do the microfinancing, all sorts of interesting things. People are using this for fraud prevention, using coupons, say, you put them on the chain. There's a lot of things that we can do here where storing information immutably and eternally is very important. People are even recording Holocaust survivors, telling their experiences and putting hashes of that onto the Hedera blockchain or the Hedera ledger, just in order to have it be forever immutably recorded that on this date, this recording was recorded.
Yeah. It's a lot of opportunities. I know we're running out of time a little bit. We did have a lot of questions about the future, but you did mention the community nodes and mirrors in general, and all of us who are builders in the community, like Jeremy, myself, and many of the folks in HBAR Foundry, we have had at length conversations about mirror nodes. How do you have an anti-fragile, kind of ecosystem for them? How do you run them efficiently and in an economically viable way? Love to hear your feedback on that.
Yeah. So today, anybody can download the source code and then download the data and run a mirror node. And then your mirror node will be telling you what's going on in Hedera in real time, very, very fast. And it will have cryptographic proofs. You can absolutely believe everything your mirror node tells you. And it's all stored in a database, and you can do arbitrary database queries. If you own the mirror node, you can do that. When people query it over the internet, we don't let them do arbitrary SQL queries because they could just delete everything. But if you own the mirror node, you can do that. So there's real advantages to owning a mirror node. In addition to which, you could do it as a service to the others. So you could just run a mirror node just because you want to serve the community, or you could do it as a service. And so someone would maybe pay per query, or they would pay a monthly fee, and then they get so many queries per month. And you could then monetize this mirror node that you're storing. And I would encourage people to do that. I think this is a very interesting business model. And I know a number of people are looking at this right now. And can we run mirror node as a business and make money off of it, and enough to keep in business? And eventually, when we have petabytes of data, because we're the most used network right now, what you could do is even have tiered systems. And we're writing the code. That's one of the things we're writing right now is to build tiered systems so that you would have some things that are immediately answerable. When you submit a query to the mirror node, it immediately gives you an answer. But maybe everything that's happened more than 1 year ago, you would say, fine, submit a query and pay for it. And then I will go off to my cold storage, which is a bunch of tapes stored under a mountain somewhere. And 24 hours from now, I'll have your data, and then you can query me again and get it immediately. You might even do that for really old things. Yes, I have things going on. I actually need to leave in 2 minutes. But anyway, yes, I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. One last thing about mirror nodes, and then we'll wrap this up. So we have been kicking around this idea of, could you run mirror nodes on low Earth orbiting satellites? What do you think about that? What do you think about the jurisdictional impact?
I love it. I think it's fantastic. If you're doing on something like Starlink, when they get their inter-satellite lasers, you could have lower latency than running it on the world. I mean, just on ground. There are places on ground that will be vastly slower than Elon running a Starlink satellite. I think it's a great idea. And it also protects you against certain types of attacks, not all attacks, but some types of attacks that could happen on the ground, wouldn't happen in orbit. So you want a mixture, that would be good. I think orbit would be great. Jurisdictional is a really interesting question. The way the world has dealt with orbit in the past is they have said that each orbit is owned by somebody, not a spot over the ground. So it doesn't matter what countries you fly over, but to say it's this inclination and declination, and I don't even know what all the terms are, right ascension, and at this point on that orbit, this satellite now belongs to you and the space around it belongs to you. So you might do the jurisdiction is based on that. Maybe it's based on the company that puts it up there. Ships have a different approach. Their jurisdiction is wherever it's flagged, and the flag might not be who owns it. It might not be who built it. It may just be some little country that flagged it. That's a really interesting question. Maybe they'd be flagged like ships.
It's very interesting.
So we do want to, we have run out of time. I think JR is going to do a quick, just next steps. one request that we have heard, Leemon, for you, this is just a little homework for you, is we all loved your turbo encabulation algorithm. Looking forward to the second edition, the side fumbling direct edition. So please keep that release.
We will get right on that. Turbo encabulator is an extremely old joke. You can look at Wikipedia and see the history of it. And I tried to incorporate as many pieces of the old joke into mine as I could.
We need edition number 2, please.
I love it.
Go wrap it up, please. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. No, thank you for that. And so this has been an excellent town hall. We can't thank you enough for your time, Dr. Baird, Leemon. This has been really exciting. The HBAR Foundry has been working hard in this ecosystem for a long time. I want to thank Jim for doing so much work to help prepare for this town hall. I want to thank all the HBAR Barians out there in YouTube land. I want to thank all of our HBAR Foundry members, the guys that we meet, 3 times a week, and it's just a great bunch of guys. I can't thank them enough for all the effort. Every time I show up at the HBAR Foundry, seeing their smiling faces, it re-energizes me. If folks want to join us at the HBAR Foundry, people that are interested in building on or around Hedera, please join us at hbarfoundry.com. We would love to have you. Like I said, we meet Fridays at 11 a.m. and it's a real fun and informal meeting. Of course, everybody keep in mind that Hello Future Live is coming. October 6th, 7th, and 8th. That's going to be super fun out there in Los Angeles, California. We're working on important things at the HBAR Foundry, things like Wallet Connect, things like decentralized identity, domain resolution with Kabuto. We're working with Ken Anderson over at Kabuto there on name resolution, secure messaging. There's all kinds of things that we're working on and looking forward to in the future. And we've got another town hall. So we're going to make this an ongoing, we're going to make this a routine. So stay tuned. October 24th, our tentative date. We are going to be joined by some of the Grant Association folks. We'll be joined by the CEO of the HBAR Foundation, Shane Higdon, and Sharky Rob Allen of the Hashgraph Association will also be joining us. So we are super excited about that. Great guys, great fun. Again, Leemon, thank you so much for doing this. It's been a blast, and I look forward to doing it again.
Thanks. It's been great.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and we will see you next time. Signing off.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.